Okay, good morning everyone.
Good morning, Martin.
Thank you. Just in a minute we are listening to Tim and the presentation. But before that, I'm going to leave the mic to Niklas. We have some schedule changes because we have moved 15 minutes. So now it's coffee at 10:45 to 11:10. Okay? Niklas.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning, Niklas.
Great, you are great. Unfortunately, I have to leave this morning earlier, so I want to
Boo.
more. I'm very sad not to listen to your keynote, but I definitely will watch the video after that comment. But it's my job to officially invite you to the next EKIC in Poland. So please mark your calendars, register, put it already there. Keep in mind to register early, and I hope to see you all there. And maybe you can advertise EKIC. I hope you make good experiences with it. Maybe we can grow our network, and I hope to see you online during the year in the Facebook group or on Twitter. So have a nice Friday and a safe trip home. Thank you very much, and see you next year.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. The microphone is on, that's a good sign. Now, I had a reflection a few days ago, and several people told me I was talking too fast. So I need you to tell me if I'm talking too fast as I go along. If I do not make sense anymore, then I expect people to wave hands and interrupt. Okay? Right, good. So, I've been asked to talk about emotions online. I'm going to try and talk about some of the research projects that I have done. And I'm in the process of working on a couple of different academic pieces of writing about emotions and religion and the internet. So this is work in progress. I will be describing some of the emotions of the internet, I guess. And if you have thoughts about things that I've missed, then I would like to hear them. It would be very helpful. This is a picture that I like. I have stolen it from one of the bigger churches in America called Life Church, which is based in Oklahoma. That's not my fault. There's nothing I can do about it. Do any of you have the YouVersion Bible app on your phones? Very few. That's kind of interesting. Okay. This is produced by Life Church. But this is a picture that they produced to advertise one of their sermon series called Love Like Jesus, which is an interesting invitation, I think. That's not supposed to happen. There we go. I didn't touch anything. Anyway, so yes, we've talked a little bit at this conference about things like what would Jesus do, which is a very difficult invitation, I think. Because obviously the answer to what would Jesus do is things like save the world and be crucified and things that we're not necessarily going to do every week in our parishes. But love like Jesus is more of a challenge, I think. Because loving like Jesus involves things like getting angry and turning over tables and shouting at people sometimes and confusing people and wandering off into the desert and leaving everybody alone and forgetting to plan any food for them in advance. So if we start here, I think, we end up considering a range of different emotions that we might be engaging with. Anyway, let's get started. In Stockholm University, which is where I work, I am working on a project called Existential Terrains, I have some leaflets about the project which I would like to give to you later on. If you would like more information, then here's a very small web address which possibly you cannot read. So, Stockholm University, existential trained. These people are sponsoring the project. This is something I need to tell you about. But we are working on death and digital media. There are 5 of us in the team, and we're studying things like what happens online after somebody dies. If somebody knows that they have terminal cancer, how do they talk about that on the internet? If someone has lost a relative to suicide, what support networks can they find online to help them out? Actually, some of the things that Charlotte was talking about yesterday in her keynote as well. And to cheer you up on this beautiful day, I'm going to talk about death a little bit later on at the end of the talk, but I'm going to start with a more cheerful topic and talk about churches. I think it's a more cheerful topic. You may disagree. So we'll talk about 2 things. In the first half, we'll discuss how we use emotions to build a community. And in the second half, I'll talk about the rules of how we feel what we're supposed to feel. So, this is quite an old example where internet started. The Church of Fools was launched in 2004. It was at the same time as a group called iChurch, which I know you've heard about before at ECIC many, many years ago. Does anyone remember Church of Fools? Okay. Did anybody related to Church of Fools come to ECIC? I don't know. I know I've heard someone from the Diocese of Oxford came and talked about iChurch. Anyway, this was a very small virtual world. It was launched in 2004, and it was funded by the Methodist Church. And the idea was to see if you could do something like church on the internet that would be open and welcoming to people who maybe were not very comfortable in traditional churches, and would engage with the culture of digital media. A lot of the things that were said when this church was launched were actually rather similar to the things that Charlotte said yesterday about the Church of Sweden's social media work. So people said things like, we need to go where the people are. One of the people who founded this gave a very interesting speech saying that the internet is like a city with no church, and you would never let that happen, so we have to go up there and build a church for the people on the city of the internet. But Church of Fools was a mix of different things. It was 2 digital rooms, one of which looked like a very traditional church building, or at least a traditional English church building, with pews and small cartoon characters who could walk around. That one looks a bit like Ned Flanders. And then there was a second room underneath the church, which was called the crypt, and it was full of armchairs. And you would go there and sit and be comfortable and have a conversation. And a lot of interesting things happened in this church. The first is, it was very silly, which was deliberate. They tried to do this. The mix of a very serious-looking church building with silly cartoon graphics was supposed to be eye-catching. It was supposed to get people's attention. It was supposed to get journalists interested, which it did. There was lots and lots of media coverage of this around the world. And I think for a lot of people, the appeal of this kind of space was that church is normally very serious, but if you go somewhere that's a little bit silly, you have permission sometimes to open up a bit more. And maybe to say what you're really feeling, or what you're really thinking about, or what you don't feel like you can say in your own church. You could go in here and be anonymous. If you were, for example, a vicar, and you work constantly in your local parish, and you're always doing your best to be the right person for your parish, sometimes you need to go somewhere and say what you're really thinking. And an internet church can be that place for a lot of people. If you would never go into a church at all because you think that church is a very oppressive place, or you've had bad experiences with churches in the past, or you just feel that church is a very foreign culture to you, maybe an internet church is a much easier place to step inside. There's less of a risk, perhaps. So what you had here was a mix of serious worship events and silly games. People running around and pulling out their hair and finding silly things to do. But the other thing you got in here, in Church of Fools, was quite a lot of trolling. So you've got seriousness, you've got silliness, and you've got people causing trouble. And I think this is worth talking about because we've mentioned trolling a lot at this conference, and it's always discussed as something very, very serious, I think. Which is how the media talks about trolling nowadays. Trolling is Russian troll factories trying to bring about racial war in Europe. Trolling is awful. Trolling must be stopped. The police should get involved. But of course, actual trolling on the internet is a very, very broad range of things. Some of which maybe are very serious, and a lot of which are just trying to be kind of irritating. I'm sure you know this, but the original idea of trolling, the original meaning of the word, is related to fishing. Right? You're putting out some bait on the water and you're waiting for someone to catch it. So really what you're doing is, I think, the perfect troll, you're posing as a character, or you're trying to find the exact thing to do that will provoke a very strong emotional reaction from people on the internet. It doesn't really matter if you believe it or not, but you find something that's really provocative, and then you enjoy provoking lots of emotion. And Church of Fools was full of this. People loved the idea that you could go into a church building and shout rude words. You could rush up into the pulpit, which was a mistake. They probably should not have allowed people to do that. But briefly, you could rush up into the pulpit and give your own sermon. And so somebody rushed up and said, "I am Satan, and I'm here to talk to you about the gospel of the Antichrist." And this became a very big publicity moment for the church, because, well, supposedly one of the church wardens goes and talks to this troll and says, I'm terribly sorry, I'm the church warden, you can't be here. And the person who was pretending to be Satan apologised and said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I'll leave." And they turned that into a press release, and they said, "Satan apologises to the Church of Fools." And this was a huge news story, and it was covered by journalists all around the world. So, lots and lots of trolling, causing lots of grief, trying to provoke lots of emotion. Some of it is serious, but a lot of it's very silly. And what happened in response to that was that a community of volunteers built up inside the church, who volunteered huge amounts of their time to try and keep the church safe. Kicking out people who were causing trouble, finding ways to talk to people who were disruptive and bringing them into the community. And so what happened was, partly because of the trouble that the church experienced from trolling, you ended up with a core group of users who became such good friends that they're still talking to each other today, 12 years later. And I think that's all a story about emotion. It starts off being a story about silliness. It becomes a story about seriousness. There's a lot of troublemaking involved. And you end up with a community that's bonded together by a shared story and shared experiences and shared emotions that they've gone through together. Anyway, that's enough about that as an example. Here's another one. This is Life Church, as I mentioned before, the church that wants you to love like Jesus. They are much, much bigger than Church of Fools ever was. Life Church is an American megachurch, more or less, and they broadcast their services online. Actually, Life Church is a campus church, which I don't think we have in Scandinavia yet. So you have one building in Oklahoma City where the pastor stands up and preaches on stage. And then there are about 30 other buildings all over the United States, which are like cinemas. So you can go and sit there, and there are rows and rows of seats, and there's a big screen up at the front, and you go and sit there on a Sunday morning and you watch the broadcast of the guy preaching from Oklahoma City. And the idea is, of course, that the preacher is so great that it's better for everybody to hear the words of the amazing preacher than to have their own local pastor try and muddle through a sermon. Apologies to local pastors who may be here. But you can do all of that online. So Life Church broadcasts its services, and they broadcast their very high quality music, they broadcast their preaching, and alongside you have this chat room where people discuss what they think about the service and they respond to it. And there will be adverts down here and chances for you to share the message with your friends, invite other people to come along and join you and so on. And you've got hosts in the chat room. And what's interesting about this, if you compare it to Church of Fools, is that this, I think, is a church that's united by emotion, again, but it's a very strong focus on specific emotions. Church of Fools, I was trying to say, had lots of different kinds of emotional goings on. This, I think, does not. So if you look at the kind of things that people say in the chat room, there's a host, and the host says, "We're super glad you're here. You're just in time. It's really great. We're all needing this today." Very positive, very encouraging, very inspirational, very all the time. And occasionally you'll have somebody who doesn't like the positive, inspirational stuff. There's somebody who's come in here and is complaining that he keeps getting kicked out. And Michael comes in and says, "All I said was, the last time there was a service, I said I'm not going to be voting for the Democrats." He said a ruder word than Democrat, but that's close enough. And the hosts immediately say, "Well, how does that pertain to the message of Christ? We're not interested in that, get out." Or, something more encouraging. And you get something similar going on Facebook. So, Life Church has Church Online, where they broadcast these messages and people talk about it. They also have a Facebook channel. And the Facebook channel is also very inspirational, very positive, very encouraging, very friendly all the time. So this is a post from a while ago. "Today is National Lookalike Day. Just for fun, who is your doppelganger? Which celebrity do you look like? Find out here." To me, at least, this is rather different from the Church of Sweden messages that we were hearing about yesterday. This feels, and I'm sure there's a deliberate style they're going for, but it feels a bit less rehearsed, a bit more informal. This church, even though they have hundreds of thousands of followers, wants to be everybody's best friend. And if you disagree with that emotion, if you don't like it, if you complain, there's no place for you, I think. So, two different churches. One of them open to silliness and troublemaking and building community by trying to deal with that as time goes on. And the other one focused on inspiration, positivity, friendliness, but with very little space for anything else. Can either of those things be church? This is not an easy question. As most of you know, I'm sure, Christians have talked about this endlessly. If you read church reports about the internet or books of digital theology, online churches get mentioned somewhere. Which is great for me, as someone who studies online churches, because I have lots and lots of very quotable things. But normally, online churches only get mentioned as the example of the internet gone wrong. So, for example, this is a quote from the Church and the Internet, which was a Vatican report in 2002. And it's mostly about the internet being a very positive thing. And then they talk a bit about the dangers of the internet. And then the idea of church on the internet comes up really as the ultimate example of the disaster that might happen if we let this all get out of control. So there's this passing quote, "There are no sacraments on the internet, and even the religious experiences possible there by the grace of God are insufficient without real-world interaction with other persons of faith." And this was mentioned yesterday, I think, as the typical organisational church response to the internet. What if people stop coming to our church? What if the internet is easier? It makes them lazy. What if it's more attractive? Catherine Shuri, who is, or was at the time, the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church in the USA, gave a radio interview, I think, in which she said, "It's hard to build a faith community on the internet. We deal with caricatures rather than full human beings sitting in our presence." So you can see the Vatican and this Episcopal bishop have kind of a similar approach. They're both saying you have to be face-to-face with somebody to get the full range of their emotions, I guess, to get the full range of their presence and what it is they're trying to say to you. John Piper is a famous Baptist preacher and author, and he's given an even more striking online comment. Somebody said to him, "What do you think about church on the internet?" And he says, "It seems sick. There is something wrong with you if you want to do church on the internet. We are created as bodies. There are no bodies on the internet, it's just minds. And so if you're going to church online, there's something wrong with you." Which is interesting. But of course, people have been going to church online now for at least 30 years. They do not appear to all be sick. So I thought I would share one example with you of a story, a testimony about church online, which also relates a lot to these questions of emotions that we're discussing. It's quite long, but I'll read it out. So William, who is a migrant worker in Spain, says, "I woke up one morning and I googled some stuff about church and some stuff about God because I needed something different. I was starting to search again. And I came across church online." So he finds Life Church, the big broadcast church I was telling you about. "And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I cracked a beer open, and I see this chat thing going on. And I see there's live music playing. And I sat and listened to it, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful, engaging. And I went over at the end, and I logged on, and I kept saying to myself, what on earth am I doing? I'm sharing with people on a chat thing. They could be anybody. And I started talking to the campus pastor, and I felt as if I was breaking down, and I finished the beer and went to bed, and I woke up the next morning and I was a different guy." Now this is a testimony that Life Church has shared. This is not like the typical story of what happens to everybody on the internet. But it's interesting. It tells us a whole bunch of things about what the internet can do in ministry that traditional churches maybe struggle with. So you've got somebody having a moment where he feels like he is open to searching for spirituality, but that moment is 3 o'clock in the morning. His local church is shut, his local vicar is asleep, but online he finds a church that's live and broadcasting. And this is a big thing that lots of people told me in interviews. If you can't sleep and there's something on your mind and you need somebody to pray with, then the internet is the place to find that. And he goes to church online, and it's a broadcast, and he's welcomed, which is an emotional thought. And he listens to music, which is very moving, which is also emotional. And he starts sharing something with people. He starts sharing with the campus pastor. And he has a very strong emotional experience. He's breaking down and he changes something about who he is. As far as I can see, this is all a story that wouldn't have happened, or at least wouldn't have happened in the same way in a traditional church. It's partly, I think, a story about being anonymous. This is the power of being safe in your bedroom, logging onto the internet when nobody knows who you are, and you have the freedom to say, there's a question I want to ask that I've never asked anybody before, and this is what it is. So, I know a lot of you here have been involved with online ministries. Some of you have been involved with online churches. Would anyone like to comment at all on what's gone by so far? Yeah.
Not necessarily from that perspective, but it maybe connects with something else that I recently, I usually get my information from podcasts, and I listened to one of the sociologists who was talking about what's the good life, especially what's the good life in a digitalized world, and he was making the suggestion that good life is when you feel a strong connection between yourself and the world. And in many cases, that connection, you feel it stronger when you're in a non-digitalized situation. For example, with music, with live music, you may have a stronger feeling of connectivity, but you cannot always have live music. So the digitalization of music only makes it possible for you to have the music. And in a similar way, I think that offline church experience can be more intense, but it's not available in the same way to people. And also, maybe that kind of experience that would be meaningful to you is not available in the place where you are. For example, a face-to-face conversation with my grandma is more meaningful to me than a Skype conversation, but we don't live in the same city, so I can't. So it's a way of having that experience at all in many cases.
That's true. So there are lots of people who go to church online because they are unable to find a church in a local area. Maybe they're unable to leave their home. But also, a face-to-face interaction is not always more intense. It's not always better. A face-to-face interaction can be awkward or embarrassing or difficult, or just for a lot of ways, when you're anonymous and online and there's a bit of a distance, you can open up and talk about a lot of different things. So there are advantages to both of those, which is one reason why people often talk about feeling very close to people that they talk to on the internet. But yes.
You had one quote with the God made us with body stuff. I've learned from handicapped persons that it's not always it's good to be with a body somewhere. Something is missing, and online churches for them they have a lower entrance level to get in. I've learned it, especially because in my confirmation class, you heard this morning, every time I play guitar and sing. And 5% of people in the world can't sing. They don't like it. And I thought it would be very including, but for them, it's really excluding. And so I think with the body stuff, this is really a statement of somebody who is has all possibilities, and he judges every person who feels that he's missing something. In an online church, it's really possible. Yeah, if you look internet meeting, there are lots of people with handicaps, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. I'm going to move on because I don't want to run out of time. But yes, okay, good point. So that was a very optimistic comment, I guess, or yes, discussion. But I think it's also worth talking about Bible apps for a different approach, a different way of thinking about the emotions of the internet. I've switched on. Anyway, okay. This is YouVersion, which some of you know about. It's the world's most popular Bible app. It's produced by Life Church, the same church that does those online broadcasts. And it has now about 200 million installs around the world, which is a lot. But it's designed to do a few different things. It makes lots and lots of translations of the Bible accessible to you wherever you are. There are no study tools, really. It's just you and the text of the Bible. But there are lots of tools built in to try and encourage you to read the Bible more. This is a screenshot from one of their TV adverts, I think, or internet adverts. You have what looks like a college student walking through a park and she's saying, I never read the Bible until I came to college, but now I read it daily from my YouVersion app, exclamation mark. She's excited about this, it's changed her life, and she's sharing it with the whole world on Twitter. YouVersion really likes the idea of sharing. You read the Bible, but it's not just for you. You read the Bible and you find your favourite bits, and then you share them with people. And they claim, according to their own statistics, that this has a huge impact on how often people read. This is from YouVersion's own statistics. It's a very striking finding, but it's from their own user survey, so I can't prove that it's representative. But they say proximity brings engagement. When they asked some of their users, do you turn to the Bible more because it's available on your mobile device? 77% of them said yes, supposedly. Proximity, ease of access seems to work, but they're trying to do more. This was a couple of releases ago, and they brought out Bible App 5, which is a social network. So you are connected with some of your friends, not everybody. You can't be a YouVersion celebrity, you have to choose a certain number of friends to talk to. And then they find out what you read, and when you read it. And you can share with them what has particularly moved you, and you can put comments on each other's messages, and it becomes a kind of mini Facebook for your Bible, again. With, again, lots of encouragement to share. And the empire has spread a bit, and there's also a Bible app for kids. We heard from Mikos about a Bible app in Germany. This is one from America, which is, again, using lots of emotional language, designed to help your kids fall in love with God's Word. And love here is about proximity and frequent access. Discuss, I don't know. But the idea is that if your kids play with the Bible and they interact with the stories, and you design it like a game, you can get them to read it again and again, and eventually they'll want to share it. So, what's good or bad about this? From the emotions point of view, this is a really interesting project. It's something that's worth discussing for us today. Because if you look at what actually gets shared through the YouVersion app, there are very specific types of Bible verses that people want to discuss online. Every year, YouVersion releases a list of the most popular verses, the bits of the Bible that people share most, or the bits that they engage with most. And it's always things like this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not be anxious about anything. Be strong and courageous. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. The first time YouVersion released this, the Christianity Today headline was something like, Sorry, John 3:16. Because the famous Bible verses, or the most famous Bible verses, were not listed at all. Instead of verses that had lots and lots of sermons preached about them, the kind of verses that people put up on posters by bus stops, the sort of verses that have lots of doctrinal content, the internet seems to be encouraging the sharing of Bible verses that are inspirational and warm and positive and uplifting and hopeful. Which is, you'll remember, also what happens all the time in the Life Church online church community. Lots and lots of positive, hopeful, everything is great, everything is wonderful, I love everybody conversations. And that makes sense. That's the kind of stuff that people want to share online. This is the cat video of Bible verses, basically. This is the cute kitten with inspirational, get out of bed tomorrow, this morning I've made you coffee, kind of message of the Bible. It's stuff that is not going to upset anybody. Nobody is going to be offended if you say, be strong and courageous. Everybody may feel a little bit of a buzz from seeing that and then pass it on to somebody else. And at the same time, all the rest of the Bible, which is a big, complicated book which is full of troubling stuff and difficult passages and things that do not fill you with hope and confidence and inspiration, gets lost, maybe. So I think, if we look at YouVersion, we can see something which is encouraging and also maybe worrying about the emotions of the internet. Certain emotions get shared, certain emotions spread, if you want to be a successful online person, you have to make sure you keep up with the right emotions, and everything else disappears a little bit. Okay, we are getting through our time, so I should move on. So I've talked a bit about building community, and I've tried to suggest that you can build community online with playfulness, shared work, and often with a lot of shared positive inspirational thought. I would also add, all of the communities that I've talked about are based on the work of hundreds of volunteers. These communities are all successful because an institutional church puts a bit of funding in, builds a platform, and then empowers enthusiastic followers to go away and do the actual work of talking to people, promoting what's going on, sharing messages, finding ways to get everybody involved. So we're coming back a little bit to what I was saying a few days ago about the church being a fan community, not a company. The church started all of those projects going and then gave a lot of freedom to individuals to go away and do something with them. Anyway, so that's how you build community. What about the rules? There are a couple of sociological ideas that are very important in the study of emotions, which were introduced in or discussed in a book called The Managed Heart that was published in the 1980s. The first one that you may have heard of is called emotional labour. I think that's worth thinking about in terms of the previous discussion, those online communities. The idea of emotional labour is that in lots of industries, like being an airline flight attendant, or being a barista in a coffee shop, or being a nurse, or being a nanny, your job, to a large extent, is about feeling the right stuff and showing everybody what you're feeling. Your job is being happy and making people feel comfortable. So your job is not just doing certain things, it's also feeling certain things and making sure you're always smiling at the right time. And when that idea was discussed in the 1980s, it was supposed to be, I think, quite critical. Isn't it shocking that this is what has become the way that work is done in the modern world? It's also the way that the church does the internet. And it's often the way that the church does church. Being a good Christian is about feeling the right emotions and sharing them with people and smiling at the right times and then posting the right uplifting Bible verse in the morning, perhaps. So that's emotional labour. The second idea related to that is feeling rules. And the idea of feeling rules is that in a community or a culture or a context, we have a lot of often unwritten, unspoken rules about how you feel and what you feel and how you talk about it. So if you imagine a funeral, there are lots and lots of rules around a funeral about who is supposed to cry, when they're supposed to cry, who is supposed to laugh, and you're not supposed to break those rules. So you might have a funeral in which everybody is very serious, and the people who are closest to the dead person cry, but everybody else preferably doesn't. This is very English now. Your country may disagree about it. And then after the funeral you have a wake, where everybody is happy and enthusiastic and starts laughing again. Those are feeling rules that are quite fixed. One of the things that I think happens online is that people start trying to break the rules of emotions. They start trying to talk about how to feel things differently. Here's an example to start us off. Celebrities. Celebrities die a lot. A lot of celebrities have died this year. Some people get very upset about this. But one of the things that has been interesting to see over the last couple of years is the rise of online celebrity grief. When a pop star dies, people rush to Spotify to listen to their music. They start talking on Facebook and Twitter and other social networks about how much that musician meant to them. You get things like this Jezebel article, which is a very long blog post about somebody explaining that Prince meant more to her than anybody else in the world because she was the best fan. Lots and lots of online discussion of how sad people are and how much celebrities meant to them. But the same kind of thing happens for normal people. When somebody dies, since the 1990s, it's been quite common for people to set up online memorials. You can find an online cemetery where you pay a few dollars, maybe, and you create a page, and on that page you put photographs and videos and stories about the person, and you create a memorial wall where people can leave their own messages. And maybe you have a service where you can come and light candles. You can share updates from the funeral, that kind of thing. And these are often described very emotionally, as you would expect. This is an example called Much Loved. And as you can see here, there's a picture of a child snipping a flower, and the message is, preserving your memories of loved ones forever. By creating this online memorial, you can carry on building a bond, a connection with the person who's died, and you can keep them alive in a sense forever. Memorial videos are very common. Lots of people create videos for people who have died. You can also find companies that will do this for you now. And one thing that's interesting about these videos, and I'm talking here as somebody who studies death, so I'll keep saying things like, it's very interesting how sad everybody is, which is a bit, morbid, but bear with me. One of the things that's fascinating and very interesting about this is that the comments on these YouTube videos will often be from people who have nothing to do with the original death. The most popular videos, and that's a bit of a weird word to use, but the videos that are viewed and commented on the most are attractive young people, particularly young women who've died in car crashes, and babies. Lots and lots in those categories. Teenagers and babies. And you get a video like this, and underneath, in the comments, lots and lots and lots of people will say, I never knew this person, but I had the same experience. Or maybe I lived near them, or I knew them at school. But often, I don't know you, but I also lost a child, or I also lost somebody in a car crash, or I've also lost somebody to cancer, or whatever it may be. So you have communities online of people who've had the same emotional experience of grief and are going through it in their own different ways. You also get this on Facebook. And this is becoming a bit different now. If you think memorial cemeteries, memorial videos, those are special places where you go. But these are just Facebook profiles. If I were to die, which would be very sad, my Facebook page will still be online, and that will be my memorial. If you think of Egyptian pharaohs building a pyramid, spending a great deal of their reign building the thing that they will be remembered by, I've already done that. I've built a Facebook page. I've spent years on it. And you could go to that Facebook page and you could look back through all of the photographs I've taken and the things I've written at different times. And then you could use that Facebook page to talk to everybody else I know, basically. So this is a very public kind of grief. This is not how grief used to work. You have lots of people, particularly school friends of young people, who will go to their Facebook page and they will carry on talking to someone who has died through social media. This is very public on Facebook, but we know it also happens through mobile phones, for example. It's quite common to ask for a mobile phone to be buried with someone who's died, and then you can carry on texting them. It's common to write letters to people who've died, all sorts of things. But online, all of that happens in public. And there's an interesting kind of shared story that goes on in these messages. So you see things like this. Happy New Year, Angel. I hope you're having a song and dance up there, although I know everyone would rather have you down here with us. So that's somebody sending a message to the dead. They're writing as if the dead person can hear them, and they're talking about heaven as a very active, busy place where there's a big party going on. This was a New Year's Eve message. So heaven is supposed to be just like Earth. They have New Year's parties in heaven, they have Christmas parties, they have birthday parties. You can still listen to your favourite music, and you can still read Facebook. People don't tend to talk very much about Christianity in these kinds of messages. But it looks like, for the most part, when academics have done studies of Christian communities, they do all of the same things. There doesn't seem to be much of a difference between the way that Christians talk about death and the way that everybody else talks about death in modern Western societies. And I've talked to some priests about this in the Church of Sweden to say, what happens when you do a funeral? Do people come to the funeral not interested in God, but they've already got a very clear idea of heaven? And yes, often they do. And the priest sometimes has the job of just not getting in the way of the theology that people have already got for themselves, which is a very odd way of thinking about church, right? Maybe. The priest's job is not to try and teach people too much because they already know something that is actually different from traditional Christianity. But it's also different from traditional feeling rules. Let's see the idea that I mentioned before. There are supposed to be rules about how you grieve in society. And the internet is allowing people to break those rules by finding communities where everybody has shared the same experience, and by going on Facebook and just insisting on talking in ways that traditionally we were not supposed to do. By the way, I mentioned building your own memorial. If you're still a little worried that your Facebook page is not good enough, you can still use digital media to create the exact memory of yourself that you would like. This is one of many, many companies offering similar services. It's called Safe Beyond. And it promises to let you secure your legacy forever. And the way you do this is you buy a Safe Beyond account, and then you record lots and lots of messages. All of those messages are directed to particular people in your life, and you attach them to particular life events. So the idea I've heard from the guy who created Safe Beyond is that imagine if you are a father and you have a child, and one day that child will grow up and get married. So you set up a Safe Beyond account and you say, in about 20 years, I want you to surprise my daughter with this message on her wedding day. And whatever message it is that you wish to convey to people. And through doing this, you can be around forever. You can allow your digital legacy to outlive you. Which is interesting. It feels partly this is a response to a kind of anxiety, I guess. You know that people are going to be talking about you online after you die, but how do you control what they say? What if they say the wrong things about you? Using a service like this, you have a chance to carry on being part of the conversation and reminding you of the things that you wish that they would all discuss. What seems to be happening is that talking with the dead and grieving online is becoming extremely common, and there probably aren't very many people who are trying to control the conversation in this way, but we shall see. So, I talked a bit about feeling rules. What's the point, again? One idea is that online grieving is helping people who are marginal somehow to the traditions of how you're supposed to feel. And this is a pet cemetery. You can go online to sites like this, and you can create a memorial for your pet. One of the interesting things about these pet cemeteries is that actually a lot of people create memorials for someone else's pet. Like my next door neighbour's cat, or the dog that I sometimes walk. It's very difficult to say to your employer, I need a week off work because I've had a personal family tragedy, my cat has died. Even though that's how a lot of people feel. You're not supposed to, that's not in the rules of emotions. But you can go online and find other people who are willing to let you break those rules and come up with your own new way of feeling. So that's one idea. But what is also happening is that society is trying very hard to debate and contest and fight against these new rules. Did anyone hear about the idea of taking selfies at funerals a couple of years ago? A journalist, I believe, created a Tumblr in which he collected together lots and lots of pictures that teenagers had taken at funerals, or on their way to funerals. And these are selfies with messages that were being posted online. Saying things like, I love my hair, but I hate why I'm dressed up. or car ride to the funeral. These are lots of pictures of people typically showing off their outfits and how good they look, sharing some of their emotions, so lots of pictures of themselves crying, and often pictures of people messing around at funerals and not being very sad at all. And the media went crazy about this. It was a really big story for a while. This is a collection of the different ways that people responded to it. The Atlantic produced a whole line of images taken from the selfies at funerals, Tumblr, combined with deeply poetic messages from world literature about death. So what's interesting here, I guess, is that it's emotion and the way that we express emotion that's controversial. The idea here, I think, is that this guy is not showing enough emotion. He's not moved enough by the funeral. He's doing it wrong. He is acting at a funeral as if it was just any other day. And literature will tell us something different, maybe. You also, of course, get lots of trolling online. And I started off this talk being quite enthusiastic about some kinds of trolling. Trolling in online churches, which can be very irritating, but is often silly or a prank. Trolling at memorial websites is a lot more controversial. People do not generally have fond memories of that person who harassed their funeral. And there have been a couple of cases in the UK of trolls being arrested. But there have been lots of cases around the world of people going to Facebook memorials, YouTube memorials, and trying to cause as much grief as possible by telling jokes about the person who has died, creating videos in which the person who has died is humiliated in some way, that kind of thing. And the media are very stern about this. This is bad. We don't approve of this kind of activity. But when academics have talked to trolls, which is very hard to do, they're anonymous, they're not very easy to find, but there have been some academics who've gone and talked to trolls, and they tend to say that what they're doing is policing the rules of emotion. They're not trying to cause grief to the bereaved family. They're trying to wind up all of those people who have never met the dead person but still are pretending to feel sad on the internet. They're trying to make fun of all of those people who pretend to be sad when a celebrity has died because they want to look cool. Or the people who go to the Facebook page of a teenager and say things like, I never met you, but you were so beautiful and it's a shame that you're gone, which is something that people say. So the trolls are trying to restore the emotional traditions of society, they say. But, your opinion is that may vary. And what's interesting is, the trolls are doing that in a very aggressive way, but journalists do exactly the same thing. Journalists also write lots and lots and lots of articles about what's gone wrong with the emotional rules of society. Things like making fun of teenagers for the funerals at selfies trend, or making fun of people who grieve celebrities online. It's an easy think piece, I guess. You can always bash out 1,000 words about teenagers are doing something wrong on the internet. And often that something is about emotion. They have too much emotion, like this. They're grieving celebrities too much and it's ridiculous. Or they don't have enough emotion, like funerals at selfies at funerals. People are acting like funerals are just a thing that you have to go to because your family makes you go, and not, crying properly at the right moment. So we have rules about how you can and can't feel. They're being broken on the internet, and journalists and trolls are in different ways trying to put the rules back the way they used to be. And this is my last slide, and then we can discuss this if you have any thoughts. This is an example from America again. Kay Warren is married to Rick Warren, and they founded the Saddleback Church together. Rick Warren wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, which some of you may have read, The Purpose-Driven Church. And in 2013, their son died by suicide. And there was a lot of discussion of this online. Some of it was very unkind. But Kay Warren, particularly, a year later, wrote a Facebook post, which was 800 words, very long, which became a huge viral hit, I guess. It's been shared 26,000 times, it has 50,000 responses, and it has about 12,000 comments. And she's using Facebook, and she's using her own celebrity as a Christian leader to try and resist the rules of society about grief. She's complaining that people keep telling her to move on. She doesn't want to move on. That's not what she's ready to do. She has her own way of grieving, which is not the traditional approved way. She wants to continue grieving her son exactly as she wishes. And she's fed up with Christians in her church and around, people in society telling her to be quiet and stop talking about her son and return to normal life. And the 12,000 comments on this are hugely positive for the most part. Lots and lots of people saying, I've also had this experience. I'm so glad that someone from the church is finally validating my experience and standing up for me, and this is what everybody needs to hear. Which was quite similar in some ways to what Charlotte said yesterday about Mother's Day, right? The Church of Sweden using Mother's Day to say, actually a lot of people have a lot of feelings about motherhood. And lots of responses online that were very positive from people who said, thank you for finally allowing me to break the rules of what I'm supposed to say about mother. Okay. So, breaking the rules, very controversial, but sometimes the church gets involved and does it as well. That was my last slide. Would you like to comment at all about the rather cheerful discussion we've just had? Oh, have we got the microphones on? Yeah.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. The last part about grieving, I'm thinking how much is really new, because you have obituaries in the newspapers for years. The whole public aspect of grieving, we have had that for years, but many people, when they see it online, they say it's too much. Maybe because you can take a selfie in the toilet of your new dress when you attend a funeral and all these kind of things. You see but the thing is it really different from what we have had for hundreds of years?
Well, this is the question, I guess. In some ways it is. Of course, there have always been ways of grieving in public and ways of writing about grieving in obituaries. One thing is that the style of the obituary has changed a lot over time. Obituaries have become more humorous or character-focused. They are less dry than they used to be, etc. But one thing that's different online is that everybody can get involved in writing the obituary. So you don't have one person who is the next of kin, who is a close family member, who writes the official story. Instead, you have everybody you ever knew on Facebook sharing their own memories through a Facebook page, which can be very different. And it can be very difficult, actually, for people who are grieving. The stories that are shared online are not always the stories that you want to remember. But yes, so that there are similarities, but some things have changed. Okay.
You said that everybody knows the rules. I'm not sure. Especially young people feel unsure what they have to do. And I often see that they try to fit in this setting and at the same time searching for their way to express their feeling and what to do. This could be a good thing in online. For me, the selfies are, from the theological side, also a statement, I'm alive. He died, but I'm alive. And I think it could be worth it to develop rules or develop things that allows to the young people to fit in their own way. Yeah. I hope that's
Yes, I think that's true. So often what you see in stories like this is young people who maybe have not been to a funeral before.
Yeah.
They don't know that there are rules of society and things that you're supposed to do. Of course, if you're a young person, a teenager, often you go to funerals because your family tells you to. They're not always funerals of people you care about very much. Sorry. So what you see online, perhaps, is the process of learning the rules of society in a very open forum that anybody can... Well, yeah, and changing the rules sometimes as well.
it could be a job for the church showing the rules of what to do. If you go to a funeral, what you can do, what you should do, what you should not. Tutorials. I don't think it's existing nowadays.
That's true. And it's something to bear in mind if we talk about social media as something the church should get involved with, right? Because if the church says, wouldn't it be great to put messages on Facebook that encourage people to really bare their souls and their greatest difficulties and their traumas, and they get so open and they tell us stuff, Facebook is not the place for that necessarily. Sometimes when the church gets into social media ministry, it's encouraging people to behave badly on social media, I guess. Encouraging people to forget about how privacy works online and what risk is in digital contexts.
What I see is that that rules are changing what is private and what is public. For example, in Germany, on memorial websites, there are memorial websites for kids who were died right after birth. They're called, you got the new name starlet children. I don't know if you use that term in English or what term you use. So the idea is my child becomes a star in heaven. But you see the pictures that are put up publicly on websites. They are the first footprint of the baby, but also some of them you see a very bloody face of a newborn baby, and they are public. If you show them to other people, and they just turn their head away because you show them out of context. So what is public, what is private, like the birth of the baby and the death of the baby is one of the most private moments, but they become visible to the whole world. So this has changed. And also, I followed the blog of a young family that had a baby that was going to die, a small child that was going to die, and they said, we blog about it publicly, so our close friends don't have, or close friends maybe, but our neighbors, our family, our colleagues, they're not going to ask us how we are doing. They can see that on the blog, so we don't have to talk to them about the progressing, how the baby is going to die. So it's kind of I make something public so people don't have to ask me privately. Would you comment to that?
Yes, but also writing something down is often much easier than saying it in person, right? So blogging about an illness can have lots and lots of advantages. It can be a way of expressing what you really think. It can be a way of breaking down traditional barriers between the sick who are isolated and everybody else. So this can be useful for some people. I would say one interesting thing about this, I'm using the word interesting in that special academic way. If you look back historically, the invention of new technologies, particularly photography, caused all the kinds of changes that we're now seeing with the internet. So when photography was invented, people started using photography to take pictures of the dead as if they were still alive. So there was a special service of dressing up someone who had died as if they were asleep. And that became very unfashionable. But now in the digital age, there are companies that offer that service again, and they will use Photoshop to create an image of someone who has died as if they were healthy and asleep. And then you can have that picture and put it up on social media if you want to. You can have photographs of yourself surrounded by the ghosts of family members, and then someone will create that for you in Photoshop. Which is a very Victorian tradition, but it's come back again because a new technology makes it interesting in a new way. Yes, sorry. Oh, it's time for coffee, I think I'm being told. There is waving going on the back, but I think it's coffee gesture waving, not question asking waving.
30 minutes.
Okay, we have a coffee break, and then we have a reflection time afterwards. So if anyone has more burning questions, maybe they'll be time to discuss as we go. Thank you very much for listening.